Let's address the elephant in the Batcave. The Batmobile did not ruin Batman Arkham Knight. I know, some of you just clenched your jaw, some of you just tagged tank combat with malicious intent, but hold your horses.
Whoa, 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 whoa.
I like the Batmobile, not in a rock-steady can do no wrong way, but in a measured, emotionally stable, adult human being kind of way. And I also completely understand why so many people hated it, because the real problem with the Batmobile wasn't the Batmobile itself, it was psychology and the human mind. And unfortunately, your brain was never going to give it a fair shot.
Your mind is already so prodigiously empty that there is nothing in it to clear away in the first place.
There's a psychological concept called the primary effect. It basically means your brain is extremely lazy and whatever it sees first, it assumes is the most important thing forever. For example, in a lesson in school, the first 10 or so minutes are the things you remember the most. Batman Arkham Knight opens very Batmobile heavy. Tank combat, chase sequences, environmental puzzles, and mandatory vehicle sections. And for a lot of players, that creates an instant internal monologue. Oh, so this is the game now. Never mind that the Batmobile evolves, its usage spreads out, and on foot Batman still dominates the experience. That first impression sticks. Your brain stamps with a big red important sticker and refuses to revisit it later. But here's the thing people tend to forget. Arkham Knight had to front-load the Batmobile in the opening hours of the game. Even if you played Arkham Asylum, Arkham City, and Arkham Origins, you have never used the Batmobile before. This isn't muscle memory, this is a brand new system. So Rocksteady has to simultaneously teach new players, returning players, and people who played Arkham City for 5 years straight, all at once.
Easy, baby. You don't want to get hooked on this stuff.
Yeah, no need to worry. I don't have an addictive personality.
This means repetition, it means forced usage, it means the game occasionally grabbing you by the collar and force feeding you the Bat Tank. Design-wise, necessary. Emotionally, risky. And here's where your memory lies to you. The early hours of the game are slower, more restrictive, and more tutorialized, so your brain stretches them. Later on, when Batmobile sections are shorter, more varied, optional, and more complicated, they don't register as strongly, so in hindsight people say, the whole game was tank combat. It wasn't, but thanks to the primary effect, it feels like it was. The Batmobile really wasn't the problem in Arkham Knight. What was the big problem was pacing concentration. Not how much Batmobile there is, but where it's placed. Rocksteady stacked too many mandatory Batmobile moments too close together early on, and once players felt like the game was replacing Batman rather than enhancing him, resentment kicked in. After that, every tank encounter became evidence for the prosecution. Now let's talk about the bias that really doomed the Batmobile and really kicked it in the pants. Familiarity bias, also known as status quo bias or default bias. They all encompass a similar idea where people prefer familiar things over new things, even if the new thing is objectively better. There have been multiple studies done where people prefer familiar things and the default option, even if the alternative was objectively better. In the case of Arkham Knight, players prefer what they already know. Combat and Predator stealth sections are comfortable, familiar, and the reason people fell in love with Arkham. The Batmobile is new, which means psychologically it starts at a disadvantage.
At which he won 14 gold.
Not because it's bad, but because it's unfamiliar, and unfamiliar systems always feel worse at first. And this is where things get brutal. Players don't judge Batmobile combat on its own merits, they judge it relative to something else. And that something else is Arkham's free flow combat and Arkham's Predator stealth, which are, let's be honest, some of the best systems in gaming. That becomes the reference point. So the question players ask isn't, is Batmobile combat good? It's, is Batmobile combat as good as Arkham combat? And even I'll say it, no, it isn't.
Go fuck yourself, man. Think you're better than me.
I am better than you.
But that doesn't make it bad. It just means it's competing with something exceptional, and that's an impossible comparison. But let's judge tank combat on its own merits, and honestly, it's pretty good. There's actual decision making, bobbing and weaving between cannon fire, timing dodges and missile barrages, Once you unlock the double dodge, the tank feels more mobile, less stiff, and far more responsive. Weapon choice matters too. The Vulcan gun doesn't require a reload and rewards precision, but punishes sloppy sustained fire. The 60mm turret hits harder, but demands timing and reload discipline. That's real gameplay depth. But because players are anchored to combat and stealth, anything that replaces them, even temporarily, feels like a downgrade, and that's reference dependence doing its thing. There's also one more bias which acts like the silver bullet against the Batmobile: loss aversion. Loss aversion is where losses feel worse than equivalent wins feel good. In this case, time spent in the Batmobile feels like time they've lost they could have spent doing something else. Gliding, stalking, breaking bones in rhythm. Losses feel worse than gains feel good. So even a decent Batmobile section can feel frustrating, not because it's bad, but because it interrupts something you love. So what happens? The Batmobile absorbs criticism meant for pacing, boss design, force encounters, and tonal shifts. It becomes a symbol of everything players didn't like. It's easier to say the Batmobile ruined Arkham Knight than to say several design choices didn't align perfectly. And honestly, that's kind of tragic. Tank combat on its own merits is pretty good. The main issue was the human mind. It was introduced too early, judged too harshly, and compared to systems it was never meant to replace. Psychologically, it never stood a chance. And that's fitting, because Arkham Knight is a game about control, and sometimes the thing that controls your experience the most isn't the game, it's the first idea that gets into your head and refuses to leave. This is Zach, not Zach, signing off. Please remember to like, favorite, comment, and subscribe.